My business partner embezzled everything and fled the country, so I spent 2 years hunting him down internationally. 3 years ago, I thought Garrett Voss was my salvation. I was drowning in medical bills after my wife's cancer treatment. Our family restaurant, 4 generations of Moretti's serving authentic Italian food, was bleeding money. Then Garrett appeared with his designer suits and venture capital connections, promising to modernize everything while preserving our family legacy. "Trust me, Anthony," he said, shaking my hand with that $1 million smile. "I specialize in saving family businesses." For 8 months, he delivered. New equipment, updated menu, social media presence that had lines around the block. Revenue tripled. I finally felt hope again. That's when my wife noticed the discrepancies. "The numbers don't add up," she said, spreading receipts across our kitchen table. "We're serving more customers than ever, but profits are flat." I defended Garrett. He'd saved us when banks wouldn't even return my calls, but she kept digging. The morning everything unraveled started normally. I arrived at the restaurant to prep for lunch service. The locks were changed. A notice on the door read, "Closed by order of the IRS." My phone buzzed. 17 missed calls from my bank. Our business accounts were empty, not just low, completely drained. $2 million gone. Garrett's phone went straight to voicemail. I drove to his downtown office. The building manager said he'd vacated 3 days ago, paid the lease termination in cash, and left no forwarding address. That night, I found the hidden files on our shared computer. Shell companies, forged invoices, phantom employees. He'd been systematically stealing since month 2. The restaurant's success had been an elaborate cover while he siphoned everything through fake vendors and inflated expenses. The FBI agent was sympathetic but blunt. White-collar criminals who flee internationally rarely get caught. The money's probably in offshore accounts by now. My wife held my hand as I stared at the bankruptcy papers. "We'll rebuild," she whispered. But I wasn't thinking about rebuilding. I was thinking about hunting. I sold everything. Our house, my car, my grandmother's jewelry. I kept only what I needed for travel. The insurance settlement from the restaurant fire years ago became my war chest. The FBI might have given up, but I was just getting started. 3 weeks later, I was on a flight to Prague. A financial crimes investigator I'd hired had traced one of Garrett's shell companies to a Czech bank. It was the first real lead we'd found. The trail led me through 6 countries over 18 months. Luxembourg, where he'd bought art under fake names. Switzerland, where a banker recognized his photo but claimed client confidentiality. The Cayman Islands, where I spent a week pretending to be a wealthy investor just to get inside his financial advisor's office. In Malaysia, I got my first real break. A luxury hotel concierge recognized Garrett's photo. "Mr. Kane," he said, using one of Garrett's aliases. "He stayed here for 3 months last year. Big tipper. Always paid cash." Kane had rented a yacht, thrown lavish parties, and apparently fallen in love with a local art dealer named Priya. The concierge gave me her gallery's address. Priya was cautious at first, but when I showed her evidence of what Garrett had done, her expression changed. "He told me he was a successful restaurant owner from America," she said quietly. "He bought 12 pieces from me, paid cash every time." She paused, studying my face. "He's supposed to return next month. He always comes back for the monsoon season, but I need to back up and tell you how I got to that point. Those 18 months of hunting weren't just a series of lucky breaks. They were a methodical, obsessive investigation that nearly destroyed what was left of my sanity. The first breakthrough came 3 months into my search. I'd hired Reynolds Investigations, a firm specializing in international financial crimes. Their retainer was $12,000, money I couldn't afford to lose. But desperation makes you take risks. Teresa Reynolds, the lead investigator, was a former FBI agent who spoke 4 languages and had contacts in banking systems across 3 continents. She was also brutally honest about my chances. "Most people who steal this amount and flee internationally are never found," she told me during our first meeting. "The ones who get caught usually make stupid mistakes or get turned in by someone they trust. Then we wait for him to make a mistake." She studied my face carefully. "This isn't a movie, Mr. Moretti. You can't just hop on planes and interrogate people. International investigations require patience, legal channels, and significant resources." "How significant?" "If we find him, you're looking at $50,000 to $70,000 in investigative costs, not counting legal fees to actually recover anything." I didn't have $70,000. I barely had $20,000 after selling everything, but I signed the contract anyway. The first real lead came from an unexpected source: my wife's medical bills. Elena was reviewing our credit card statements, trying to understand the scope of our financial disaster, when she noticed something odd. 3 charges to medical facilities in Florida, charges that appeared during the months when Garrett claimed to be traveling for business. "Why would he need medical care in Miami?" she asked. "And why would it be on our business card?" Teresa's team investigated. The charges weren't for Garrett. They were for his mother, who had Alzheimer's and was living in an expensive memory care facility. He'd been using our business credit line to pay for her treatment. This gave us our first insight into Garrett's psychology. He wasn't just a cold-blooded thief. He was stealing to support his mother's care. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained the motivation. More importantly, it gave us a trail. The facility's billing department confirmed that Garrett had been making payments from multiple sources: our business account, 2 shell companies, and a personal account traced to a bank in Panama. "He's still paying for her care," Teresa reported. $12,000 a month like clockwork. The facility hasn't been notified of any payment issues. This was our leverage. As long as his mother needed care, Garrett would maintain some connection to the United States financial system, but tracking him still took months. The Prague lead came from one of his shell companies, Delaware Incorporated, but with a Czech Republic mailing address. I flew there in February, the dead of winter, and spent 2 weeks going through banking records with a translator. The Czech bank had records of wire transfers to Luxembourg, which led to an art dealer who specialized in Italian Renaissance pieces. The dealer was suspicious until I showed him photographs of paintings that had belonged to my family for generations, paintings that Garrett had somehow acquired and sold. This man told me he inherited these from his grandmother, the dealer said, clearly uncomfortable. He had documentation, forged documentation. The dealer went pale. Selling stolen art, even unknowingly, could destroy his reputation and business. I can provide records of our transactions, he said quickly. Banking information, shipping addresses, everything. The shipping addresses led to a storage facility in Luxembourg where Garrett had been holding other stolen art. When I arrived there with local police, we found 12 paintings, 6 sculptures, and a collection of rare coins that had been taken from our restaurant's office safe. Items I hadn't even realized were missing. But Garrett himself had moved on. The Swiss connection came from another angle entirely. One of the shell companies had purchased luxury watches from a dealer in Geneva. When I visited the shop, the owner remembered Garrett vividly. He bought 6 Patek Philippe watches, the dealer recalled, paid cash, nearly $200,000. Do you remember anything else about him? He mentioned he was buying them as gifts for his crew. His crew. He said he owned a yacht and wanted to give his crew bonuses. This led to marina registrations, which led to the Cayman Islands, where I discovered Garrett had been living on a 90-foot yacht registered under one of his aliases. The yacht was gone by the time I arrived, but the marina records showed it had been there for 4 months the previous year. The harbor master remembered Garrett as a friendly American who threw expensive parties and tipped generously. He had a regular group of friends, the harbor master said, local businessmen, some expats. They'd take the boat out every weekend. One of those friends was a British investment advisor named Churchill, who'd helped Garrett establish accounts in 3 different offshore banks. Churchill was initially reluctant to speak with me, but when I explained that I was the victim of Garrett's theft, his attitude changed. I should have known something was wrong, Churchill admitted. He had too much cash for someone supposedly running a restaurant in Ohio. Churchill provided account numbers and transaction records showing transfers to banks in Malaysia, Singapore, and Dubai. The pattern was becoming clear. Garrett was diversifying his stolen assets across multiple countries, making it nearly impossible for any single law enforcement agency to track everything. The Malaysian connection was the strongest. Monthly transfers of $50,000 to $70,000 had been going to an account in Kuala Lumpur for over a year. When I arrived there, I discovered Garrett had been living like royalty. The hotel concierge who recognized his photo was just the beginning. Over the next week, I found 3 restaurants where Garrett was a regular customer, a luxury car rental agency where he kept a permanent lease on a Ferrari, and a country club where he played golf twice a week. Mr. Kane is very generous, said his regular golf caddy, always gives big tips, always talks about his restaurant business back in America. The irony was nauseating. He was using my family's money to play the role of a successful restaurant owner while my actual family business lay in ruins. But finding Priya's gallery was the key that unlocked everything. Priya Huang was a sophisticated art dealer who specialized in contemporary Southeast Asian artists. Her gallery occupied the entire ground floor of a high-end shopping complex, and her client list included celebrities, politicians, and wealthy businessmen from across the region. When I showed her Garrett's photo, her expression immediately became guarded. "Are you a police officer?" she asked. "No, I'm the man he stole from." I explained the situation, showing her documentation of the theft and evidence of how Garrett had used my money to purchase art from dealers across the world. Priya listened carefully, then excused herself to make a phone call in her office. When she returned 20 minutes later, her entire demeanor had changed. "I've spoken with my attorney," she said. "If what you're telling me is true, then several of my transactions with Mr. Kane may have been conducted with stolen funds." She invited me into her office, where she pulled out a thick file. "Marcus Kane, that's the name he uses here, has been one of my best customers for the past year. He's purchased over $400,000 worth of art from me." She showed me receipts, photographs, and shipping records. Garrett had been building an impressive collection of contemporary art, much of it shipped to storage facilities in Dubai and Singapore. "He told me he was expanding his restaurant chain internationally," Priya continued. "He said the art was for his hotels. Did he ever mention plans to return here?" "Every few months. He has a standing reservation at the Mandarin Oriental, and he always visits during the monsoon season. He says he likes the rain." She paused, studying my face. "He's due back in 3 weeks. Those 3 weeks were the longest of my life. I stayed in a budget hotel 20 minutes from the city center, spending my days learning everything I could about Garrett's routine in Malaysia. I bribed taxi drivers for information about his regular destinations. I paid bartenders to remember details about his conversations. I even hired a private investigator to conduct surveillance on the apartment building where he'd rented a penthouse. What I discovered painted a picture of a man living without any apparent guilt or concern for the destruction he'd left behind. He'd joined an exclusive yacht club, dated several local women, and established himself as a prominent member of the expat community. He'd even donated money to local charities, my money, building a reputation as a generous American businessman. The surveillance photos showed him laughing at dinner parties, relaxing by poolsides, and shopping at luxury boutiques. While my wife was dying from the stress of our financial ruin, Garrett was living his best life on the money he'd stolen from us. When he finally returned, stepping off a private jet at the Subang airport, I was watching from the observation deck. He looked tanned, healthy, and completely relaxed. He was met by a driver in a black Mercedes, a service he'd arranged through the concierge at his hotel. I followed at a distance as the Mercedes wound through the city to his usual suite at the Mandarin Oriental. He checked in like he owned the place, joking with the staff and distributing tips to everyone who helped with his luggage. For the next 3 days, I watched him live his stolen life. Morning workouts at the hotel gym, afternoon meetings with art dealers and investment advisors, evening dinners at restaurants that cost more per meal than most people made in a week. On the 4th night, I finally made my move. I spent 3 weeks in Kuala Lumpur, learning Garrett's patterns. He favored the same restaurants, the same marina, the same suite at the Mandarin Oriental. I befriended bartenders, tipped valets, and slowly built a network of people who remembered the generous American with the perfect teeth. When Garrett finally returned, I was ready. I watched from across the marina as he stepped off a private jet, tanned and relaxed, carrying a leather duffel bag that probably cost more than most people's cars. He looked exactly the same, confident, charming, completely oblivious to the storm heading his way. For 3 days, I shadowed him. He met with art dealers, visited exclusive clubs, and spent money like it was water. My money, my family's money, the money that should have saved our restaurant and paid my wife's medical bills. On the 4th night, I followed him to a rooftop bar overlooking the city. He was alone, sipping expensive whiskey and checking his phone. Perfect. I approached his table, pulled out the chair across from him, and sat down. "Hello, Garrett." His face went white. The whiskey glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. "Anthony," he stammered. "How did you find you?" I smiled. "It took 2 years, 6 countries, and everything I had left, but here we are." He tried to stand, but I grabbed his wrist. "Sit down. We need to talk." The terror in his eyes was almost satisfying. Almost. "Look," he said, his voice shaking. "I can explain everything. There were complications, legal issues. You stole $2 million from my family. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time to... My wife died thinking she destroyed our family's legacy. That stopped him cold. Elena's dead. The pain hit me fresh. Even after 6 months, she'd fought cancer twice, survived chemo, radiation, and surgery, only to die of a heart attack brought on by the stress of losing everything. She had a heart attack the day we filed for bankruptcy. The doctors said it was the stress." Garrett's face crumpled. For a moment, I almost believed his remorse was real. "Anthony, I'm so sorry. I never meant for..." "Where's the money?" He looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route. "It's complicated. I've made investments. There are legal considerations." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of Priya's gallery. "I know about the art collection. I know about the yacht. I know about the 3 different banks where you've been parking my money." His shoulders sagged. "How much do you know?" "Everything." I wasn't bluffing. 2 years of investigation had revealed his entire operation. The shell companies in Delaware, the cryptocurrency exchanges in Estonia, the real estate purchases in Dubai. My wife might have died believing we'd lost everything, but I'd learned exactly where every stolen dollar had gone. But what Garrett didn't know was that I had backup. Sitting at a table across the bar was Chen Wei, a former Malaysian police detective who now worked as a private security consultant. Chen was expensive, $500 a day, but he understood the local legal system and had connections throughout the law enforcement community. If Garrett tried to run or call for help, Chen would ensure that the local authorities had a very clear understanding of exactly what type of criminal they were dealing with. "I can get you 20% back immediately," Garrett said quickly, "maybe 40% within a month. I want it all." "That's impossible. Some of it's tied up in long-term investments. Some of it's been spent. Figure it out." I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. The charming confidence was gone, replaced by naked fear. "Good. You have 72 hours, I continued. "Transfer every dollar back to the accounts you stole from, or I turn you over to the authorities here in Malaysia." He laughed nervously. "You can't just kidnap me. This isn't some movie. I'm not kidnapping you. I'm giving you a choice." I pulled out a second phone and showed him photos I'd taken over the past week. Garrett meeting with known money launderers, Garrett bribing government officials, Garrett purchasing stolen artifacts. "Turns out you've been very busy here in Malaysia. The authorities would be extremely interested in your activities." His face went ashen. "You've been watching me. Every move, every transaction, every crime." Malaysian law enforcement didn't look kindly on financial criminals, especially foreign ones who'd been corrupting local officials. If I turned over my evidence, Garrett would spend the next 20 years in a Malaysian prison. What he also didn't know was that I'd already shared copies of all my evidence with Teresa Reynolds back in the United States. If anything happened to me, she had instructions to immediately contact both the FBI and the Malaysian authorities. 72 hours, I repeated, standing up. All of it. I started to walk away, then turned back. "Oh, and Garrett, if you run again, I'll find you again. And next time, I won't be offering you a choice." The next morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. "Anthony, please, we need to talk." Garrett sounded like he hadn't slept. "Good. I've been making calls all night. I can get you 60% immediately, maybe 75% within the week. All of it, Garrett. Every dollar." "You don't understand the complications." I hung up. He called back immediately. "Don't hang up, please. Look, some of the money, I don't have access anymore. I made some investments that went bad. There were some Losses. What kind of losses? A long pause. Gambling. And some business deals that didn't work out. I felt my blood pressure spike. Not only had he stolen our money, he'd gambled it away. How much? Maybe $400,000. $400,000 of my money you gambled away. I was trying to multiply it to make everything right. I hung up again. But I wasn't just waiting for Garrett to make transfers. I was actively working to recover assets on my own. Chen Wei had introduced me to a lawyer named David Krishnan, who specialized in asset recovery for international fraud cases. Krishnan was expensive, $300 an hour, but he understood how to navigate the complex web of international banking laws that protected people like Garrett. The key is timing, Krishnan explained. Once he starts transferring money, we need to act quickly to freeze as many accounts as possible before he can move everything to countries with stronger banking secrecy laws. We'd already identified 7 different accounts in 4 countries that contained money traceable to my stolen funds. The moment Garrett started making transfers, Krishnan would file freezing orders with courts in Malaysia, Singapore, and Dubai. The second day, Garrett didn't call. I spent the morning following his movements through the city, staying just close enough to ensure he couldn't disappear again. He visited 3 different banks and had heated conversations on his phone outside each one. I also noticed something else. He was being watched by other people. Professional surveillance, conducted by a team that was clearly not working for me. Chen Wei confirmed my suspicions that evening. Your friend has attracted attention from some very dangerous people, he told me over dinner. Word in the local criminal community is that he owes money to the wrong type of investors. What kind of investors? The kind who break legs when they don't get paid back on time. This explained Garrett's increasing desperation. He wasn't just worried about me. He was worried about other creditors who used very different collection methods. That afternoon, I received a wire transfer notification. $200,000 had been deposited into the restaurant's old business account. My phone rang. I sent what I could access immediately, Garrett said. It's going to take time to liquidate the other assets. 60 hours left. Anthony, be reasonable. Some of these investments take weeks to unwind. Then you should have started earlier. But Garrett's problems were getting worse. Chen Wei's contacts in the local police had informed him that a formal complaint had been filed against Marcus Kane by a group of investors who claimed he'd defrauded them out of nearly $500,000 in a fake resort development scheme. Garrett had been running cons on multiple people simultaneously, using money stolen from my restaurant to pay for his lavish lifestyle, while promising local investors huge returns on fabricated business opportunities. The Malaysian authorities were now actively looking for him. The third morning, another wire transfer, $400,000. But I also received a call from Krishnan with disturbing news. 2 of the accounts we've been monitoring have been emptied, he reported. Your partner is moving money faster than we can freeze it. How much did we lose? Approximately $300,000 was transferred to cryptocurrency exchanges in Estonia and Malta. Once it's converted to digital currency, it becomes virtually impossible to trace. I felt my stomach drop. Even if I recovered everything else, $300,000 had essentially vanished into the digital ether. By evening, the total was $800,000. Still well short of the $2 million he'd stolen, but more than I'd expected to see so quickly. But the pressure was mounting on Garrett from multiple directions. Chen Wei reported that the investors who'd filed the police complaint had also hired their own private security team to locate him. These aren't people who go through legal channels, Chen warned me. If they find him first, you'll never see your money. At 11 p.m. on the final day, Garrett called. I've transferred everything I can access, $1.2 million. The rest is tied up in assets that will take months to sell. That's not our deal. It's all I can do right now. Please, Anthony. I'm trying to make this right. I checked my account. He was telling the truth about the amount. You have a choice, I said. You can sign over the ownership of all remaining assets to me, and I'll liquidate them myself, or I can call the Malaysian authorities right now. A long silence. What assets? The art collection, the yacht, the Dubai real estate, the cryptocurrency accounts, all of it. Some of that stuff it's not legally mine. It's held in trusts, shell companies. Then you better figure out how to transfer those too. Another silence. If I do this, you'll leave me alone? You won't pursue criminal charges? I thought about my wife, about the restaurant, about everything we'd lost. I'll leave you alone. But Garrett? Yeah? If I ever see your face in America again, all bets are off. The next morning, I met him at Krishnan's law office in downtown Kuala Lumpur. For 3 hours, we signed documents transferring ownership of every asset he'd purchased with stolen money. The lawyer, who clearly handled these types of transactions regularly, asked no questions. Krishnan had prepared an extensive list of assets based on our investigation. The art collection alone was valued at over $600,000. The yacht, currently docked in Singapore, was worth $800,000. 3 properties in Dubai, purchased through shell companies, were valued at a combined $400,000. There were also smaller assets, luxury watches, rare coins, and classic cars, scattered across 4 countries. This is everything? Krishnan asked, reviewing the documents. Garrett nodded miserably. I want written confirmation that all accounts associated with these shell companies have been emptied and closed, I said. Garrett provided bank statements showing 0 balances in 17 different accounts. When we finished, Garrett looked broken. What happens now? He asked. Now you live with what you've done. I stood up and walked toward the door. Anthony, wait. I turned back. I really am sorry about Elena. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I studied his face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse. You know what the worst part is, Garrett? He shook his head. She defended you. Even after we lost everything, she said maybe you had a good reason. Maybe you were in trouble and didn't know how to ask for help. His eyes filled with tears. She was a better person than both of us, I continued. She would have forgiven you. I opened the door. But I'm not her. As I left the office, Chen Wei was waiting outside with an update that put everything in perspective. The other investors found out where he's staying, Chen reported. Local police raided his hotel room this morning. He's been arrested on fraud charges. I felt a mix of satisfaction and hollow victory. Garrett would face justice, but not the justice I'd planned to deliver. What happens to him now? Malaysian courts don't go easy on financial criminals. He's looking at 15 to 20 years, especially with multiple victims. Over the next 6 months, I liquidated every asset with Krishnan's help. The process was more complex than I'd anticipated, requiring legal action in 4 different countries and paying bribes to officials in 2 of them. The art collection alone brought in $400,000 after auction fees and international shipping costs. The yacht sold for $600,000, though I had to pay $30,000 in docking fees and maintenance costs that Garrett had neglected. The Dubai properties were the most complicated. The local real estate market was depressed, and the shell companies that owned the properties had legal issues that required expensive lawyers to resolve. After legal fees and taxes, the 3 properties netted $250,000. The luxury items, watches, coins, and cars, were sold through specialty auction houses. Some pieces brought more than their original purchase price. Others sold for significantly less. In total, these smaller assets generated another $150,000. In total, I recovered $1.9 million of the original $2 million. Not perfect, but closer than I'd ever expected when I started this hunt. I used the money strategically. First, I paid off all of Elena's medical bills, debts that had been haunting me for 2 years. Then I bought back my grandmother's jewelry from the pawn shop where I'd sold it to fund my investigation. The rest went into a trust fund for my nephew's college education and a donation to a cancer research foundation in Elena's name. I never reopened the restaurant. Some things, once broken, can't be fixed. The building itself had been sold to pay off creditors, and the new owners had converted it into a chain pizza restaurant. Seeing our family recipes replaced by frozen ingredients was more painful than I'd expected. Instead, I started a consulting business helping small business owners protect themselves from fraud. My experience hunting Garrett had taught me more about financial crimes than any business school could have. I developed systems for identifying red flags, conducting background checks, and protecting assets from potential partners who might not be what they seemed. The consulting business grew quickly. Word spread through the small business community about the man who'd tracked down his embezzling partner across 3 continents. I was invited to speak at conferences, write articles for trade publications, and consult with law enforcement agencies on international fraud cases. In my first year, I helped prevent 17 embezzlement schemes. Small business owners would hire me to investigate potential partners, audit their financial systems, and train their staff to recognize warning signs of fraud. The work was satisfying in a way that running a restaurant had never been. Every case I solved, every scheme I uncovered felt like justice for Elena and our family. Last month, I got a message from Priya in Malaysia. Garrett had been found dead in his prison cell. Natural causes, the police said. Heart attack. He was 43 years old. I felt nothing when I read the news. No satisfaction, no relief, no closure, just emptiness. My wife used to say that revenge was a poison you drink hoping someone else will die. She was probably right. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about those 72 hours in Kuala Lumpur. I think about the look on Garrett's face when he realized he couldn't charm or lie his way out of the consequences. And sometimes, just sometimes, that memory helps me sleep. The aftermath of everything taught me lessons I never wanted to learn. About trust, about justice, about the difference between revenge and accountability. 3 years later, I've built a new life. It's smaller than before, quieter. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment above a coffee shop in a different city, far from the neighborhood where Elena and I had planned to grow old together. I help other people protect their businesses. I visit Elena's grave every Sunday, bringing fresh flowers and telling her about the latest case I've solved. And I sleep soundly, knowing that justice, even delayed and imperfect, is still justice. My consulting business has expanded to include international cases. Law enforcement agencies sometimes hire me to help track financial criminals who've fled overseas. I've worked cases in 7 countries now, using the network of contacts and knowledge I developed while hunting Garrett. Last week, I helped a family in Oregon recover $400,000 from a business partner who'd fled to Panama. The week before, I worked with the FBI to track down an investment advisor who'd stolen retirement funds from dozens of clients before disappearing to Costa Rica. Each case reminds me that Garrett wasn't unique. There are hundreds of people like him, charming sociopaths who use trust as a weapon and disappear when the consequences catch up with them. But there are also people like me, people who refuse to accept that justice is impossible just because someone crosses a border. The restaurant is gone. My wife is gone. The money is mostly recovered. But Garrett Voss learned something important in those final years of his life. You can run from many things, but you can't run from a man who has nothing left to lose and all the time in the world to find you. Some lessons cost everything to teach, and some people are worth hunting across the world to deliver them. The coffee shop downstairs opened 6 months ago. The owner, Maria, is a single mother who saved for years to buy the place. Sometimes when I see her working 18-hour days to make ends meet, I think about Elena and the dreams we'd shared. But I also think about Garrett and how easily good people can be destroyed by those who see trust as weakness rather than strength. That's why I do what I do now. Not for revenge, but to ensure that other families don't lose everything to charming thieves who disappear into the night. Justice delayed isn't justice denied. Sometimes it's just justice that takes a little longer to arrive.